This episode is brought to you by Companion. Iris and Josh seem like the perfect match, but when a weekend getaway turns into a nightmare, Iris realizes that things aren't as perfect as they appear. From the creators of Barbarian and the studio that brought you The Notebook comes a twisted tale of modern romance and the sweet satisfaction of revenge. Companion, only in theaters January 31st. Rated R, under 17, not admitted without parent.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
I just felt like they were actually having sex. I mean, they were actually having sex.
Well, the straight scene with Thomas near the start of the film is very full on.
Totally.
And, there's
we see an erect penis.
A penis shot, which is that. I mean, what certificate are you supposed to have for an erect penis shot?
I think you have to be an 18.
Okay.
Rated R in America.
Okay.
I thought it wasn't allowed.
I thought it wasn't allowed. I wasn't. I was like, oh. We tried to pause on the erect penis as well, because we missed that.
It is a very fleeting erect penis, it has to be said.
Hey everybody, welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. Today I'm joined by Rosie.
Hello.
Viv.
Hi.
And as always, Helen.
Hello.
And we're going to be talking about Blue is the Warmest Colour.
Thank you, as always, to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes. And thanks to Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills.
Please do remember to write a review and rate us on Apple Podcasts and anywhere you can do where you listen to the podcast, because it really does help us.
And you can join in the conversation with us on Twitter
at FlixWatcherPod and on Instagram
at Flixwatcher. Hello, film fans. Welcome to this episode of Flixwatcher podcast. In our studio today, we have Rosie and Viv. If you would like to say hello to our listeners and tell them about the work you do, please.
Hello, I'm Rosie Wilby. I'm a comedian, author of the book Is Monogamy Dead, and host of the podcast The Breakup Monologues, which is a chat show about love, relationships, and all of that kind of stuff, with guests including our co-guest today, Viv Groskop, also Richard Herring, Dolly Alderton, lots of fab people. And we do tend to record those live at King's Place, but there's one just out with Katie Brand and Miranda Sawyer, recorded live at Port Eliot Festival, and live events coming up at King's Place throughout the autumn as well.
So hopefully by the time you record, this goes out, we should be still available to get some tickets for King's Place.
Oh, so yes, indeed.
So where do they go to get tickets?
11th of October and 8th of November, kingsplace.co.uk. And there's also a show at Oxford Science and Ideas Festival on the 23rd of October.
And we're talking 2019, in case you come to this late.
Yes.
Yeah, whenever we go to a podcast and they're talking about a show or something's happening, you're like, which year were you talking about? You don't. It just helps. So,
I mean, I'll try and book them again for every year.
For next year,
yeah.
Same dates.
Same dates, yeah.
Is the best place to find them on the King's Place website, or do you have a website where people can go to?
We also have breakupmonologues.wordpress.com and an Instagram at Breakup Monologues.
Cool. And who are you?
Hi, I'm Viv Groskop. I'm a comedian and the author of a book called How to Own the Room, Women and the Art of Brilliant Speaking, which has also grown into a top 10 iTunes podcast where I interview women from all different walks of life about what they do to own the room. So it's everybody from Nigella Lawson to Mary Portas, Mary Beard, Catherine Tate, Mira Sayal, this amazing 27-year-old tech speaker called Anne-Marie Imafidon, who got a maths GCSE when she was 9.
Yikes.
And is now one of the world's most popular speakers. She's absolutely amazing. And I talked to them about how you overcome nerves, where you get your confidence from, how you put a speech together, and we really geek out about all that stuff.
I feel you need to get Greta Thunberg on there.
Oh, I'm desperate. I would kill to get Greta.
And Malala as well.
I've tried to contact Greta and said, Greta, I will walk I will walk to you. I won't use any fossil fuels whatsoever in my quest to read. No,
I'll swim across to Sweden.
Greta's a really interesting person, actually, because it's because of that new wave of speakers that actually started with Michelle Obama and all of the women who've had incredible TED Talks, like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who had a viral TED Talk about feminism. That new wave, a new way of looking at speaking that Greta really embodies that, has really inspired people to start thinking about how they could be more out there.
Sure.
And that you don't have to be some kind of really stuffy politician or be like some sort of Etonian orator to be a good speaker.
Fantastic. Well, what's the name of the podcast again?
It's called How to Own the Room.
Fantastic. We'll get onto that and talk a bit about that, I guess, in the course of this. But we're talking today about Blue is the Warmest Colour, which is your choice, Rosie.
It is indeed.
Can you tell us why you chose it and give us a 2-minute synopsis?
Okay, well, Blue is the Warmest Colour is a 3-hour French film, which was the Palme d'Or winner at Cannes Film Festival in 2013. And it tells the passionate love story between teenager Adèle and aspiring painter with the striking blue hair, Emma. And it spans 6 years from Adèle's school years to her early career as a teacher. And I was really glad to revisit this film because I think it's a captivating, beautifully shot portrayal of just how painful desire can be. And I feel, speaking as a gay woman, that it captures a particular and peculiar kind of intensity and intimacy that happens between women in romantic relationships that can veer towards being rather destructive. And I was really pleased to watch it at home for the first time with my girlfriend, because the first time I'd watched it, and the only other time I'd watched it, I was in a press screening because I was going to be talking about it on an LGBT radio show that I do on Resonance FM. And so I was in a room full of men, and it was really weird watching lesbian sex that's quite full on, and be forced to think of it in the context of the male gaze, whereas watching it at home with my girlfriend was a real hoot. And we did press pause several times to, fully clothed, try out some of the positions. So I might have changed... might have changed my take on scissoring now. I always thought it definitely wouldn't work and you'd have to do a sort of backflip off the chest of drawers or something. But we were did a kind of impromptu game of Twister, and I was like, right, I'll be the femme one, of course, and you be the one with blue hair, and I've got my leg like this, and you've got your leg through there, and we were trying to work out if the positions would work. I'm still not totally convinced, and I still think that it's quite creative and confident kind of sex that they have even from the get-go. I'm not absolutely sure that if you're a teenager finding your way with your sexuality, as I was once, that you would really go all in right away. But I do think the rest of the film is this kind of brilliant, passionate love story that I really enjoyed. And I do think one of the sex scenes has disappeared, which I was sort of rather glad about, because I remembered a spanking scene, which a lot of people write about the spanking scene. If you Google Blue is the Warmest Colour spanking,
right,
loads of people are like, oh, that's a bit of a silly scene, and I couldn't take that one seriously. And that has disappeared, which is rather interesting.
So do feel free to talk about Breakup Monologues when, refer to your podcast and stuff in this, because this, obviously you have a bit of insight into relationships and how they break up.
There wasn't any spanking when I went on the Breakup Monologues.
Was it not?
Oh, I have to come back again.
Well, I did write in my book, Is Monogamy Dead? I did talk about my adventures in the lesbian sauna, which was purely a research trip, of course. But there was a room where there was some spanking going on. But it's not one of my particular fetishes, I must say. But yeah, I am particularly interested in this film because I think that there often is a kind of burnout in lesbian relationships. I mean, I've studied all the statistics of kind of breakups and divorces and separations, and actually lesbians separate at 3 or 4 times the rate that gay men do, now that we've got kind of divorce stats for same-sex couples. And so actually, once kind of divorce rates settle down for gay couples and for straight couples, lesbians are sort of predicted to rise to the top of the divorce chart divorces.
Right.
Most divorces, even in heterosexual relationships, are initiated by women. And there's kind of an unacknowledged romantic restlessness between women. And we tend to find it quite difficult to be long-term monogamous, even though in the short term we're quite monogamous, and lesbians tend to be quite serially monogamous. It's quite typical, this film, I think, in showing this very, very passionate connection that is almost immediate, that then kind of burns out when the two people haven't, it turns out, got perhaps all that much in common in their sort of worldviews, and then they kind of go their separate ways. But there's still a deep, intense connection, and many lesbians do kind of stay close with their exes because those connections, I think, for gay women often never die. And, you know, I meet many older lesbians and have interviewed many of them for my work who say that, you know, your best friend can be your ex-partner, but perhaps not if there's been such a intense sexual connection. That's tricky to navigate, I think. But I do love the scene in the cafe where it's a couple of years since they've seen each other, and Adèle is clearly still deeply in love and very hurt and very upset. And Emma has, to some extent, moved on, and it's just heartbreaking. But I have been that woman in the cafe.
You've been the Adèle. You've been Adèle in the cafe.
Sorry, Adèle in the cafe. Who did I say?
No, you just said that woman.
Oh,
so
that woman.
Just make sure.
I have been Adèle in the cafe. Yes, crying and yeah, you know, not over that person.
Helen, what were your thoughts?
So I saw this at the cinema when it came out back in 2013, and I loved it. I thought it was brilliant. There's just so many amazingly wonderful things about it. One of my favourite scenes is where just Adèle is eating spaghetti. I just think it's a really brilliant sort of snapshot of a very ordinary life. And then obviously she meets Emma and everything changes and it becomes very vibrant and exciting. I think the two actors in it are amazing, and it's just a really colourful, honest film. However, obviously, sort of stories that came out after it
marred your opinion.
Yeah,
not more my opinion, but watching it again, having heard all that, it was a little bit different. And then I was also reading that is it Julie Maroh, the source material was.
Oh yes, that was a graphic novel, wasn't it?
Yeah, she wasn't very happy that two straight actresses were the leads. She was sort of like, they have not found any lesbian actresses to play the parts. So when you hear things like that, you're a bit like, oh, but I did really enjoy this piece of art that is a fictional piece of work, but that it's kind of hard to separate how you feel about that with sort of the realities that go around it as well.
I thought you were going to lead out with because Rosie led out with it's 3 hour long, and time for you tends to be a big problem for films, but you haven't commented on it so far.
No, I mean, it is 3 hours long, but then it's six years of someone's life.
Yeah.
And it does go at a very slow pace, and you do get at the start of the film that you are hanging around with this teenage girl, and when they're talking with their friends and the very naive conversations that they're having about sex, it feels very real and very...
You mean her friends when she's at school?
Yeah, when she's at school.
Sure.
And then how she changes as a woman and what happens to her after the relationship ends as well.
Viv, have you seen this before?
I had not seen this film before, and I was very excited when Rosie said, because I thought we were going to be watching Three Colours Blue. Kieslowski film, which fortunately I didn't watch. I actually looked up the right thing, and weirdly this film kind of passed me by when it came out in 2013, because normally I don't want to say I'd be on top of this kind of thing, but I would be on top of this kind of thing. So I was quite surprised that I hadn't seen it, and I came to it fairly open-minded. Like as soon as I saw the vague premise of it, because I know Rosie as a friend, I thought it would have some lesbian action in it. But
it was Rosie again.
My preconception was that this was going to be about what it's like to be 16, 17, 18 and be trying to work out what your sexuality is, which very nominally and superficially it is. However, because there's so much more going on in this film, and the background to it that Helen suggested, which is actually so much worse than you've said, and I'll go into that. I think this is an absolutely terrible film. I was really disturbed from the beginning to look at the Adèle.
Sure.
So in French, it's called La Vie d'Adèle. So the life of Adèle. And Adèle is
chapters 1 and 2.
Well, it's the name of the character, but it's also the name of the actress.
It is, yes.
And that in itself is always creepy, I think, right? And I looked at her and I was just watching her play this role. And it's the way that the director films it is fascinating, and that is what, I don't think this is art, I think it's soft porn, but if you think it's art, that's what makes it art, is how he gets right up when there's no sex going on, he gets right up in their face and captures every nuance of emotion, and that's very unusual. And as soon as I saw that, I just thought, that's so intrusive. How old is that girl? And I looked up and she was 17 during the filming. That's Adèle Exarchopoulos, she was 17 and Léa Seydoux was 27. And although she is 17, she looks 13. It's very disturbing. And I already felt very uncomfortable about the level of intrusion, even before the 13-minute sex scene.
You timed it.
Well, it is famously known as 13-minute sex scene.
Is it? It's not 13 minutes in one go, though, is it? It's like,
I think it's been. I think the sex scenes have been cut because they were much longer when I watched it the first time around. And I think something has been cut a little bit because the spanking is
16 minutes. I think originally in the maybe.
I think 3 minutes of spanking is a bit too much for anybody, I think. Anyway, so the director, Abdellatif Kechiche, is
I'm glad you've taken on the good names here. Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
I'm happy to take those on. He has a very controversial reputation in French cinema, and this film really nailed, no pun intended, that reputation. He took 800 hours of film to get to this 3 hours.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of talk about how the two actresses had felt very uncomfortable during the filming. Léa Seydoux said in one interview that she felt like a prostitute.
She has since kind of toned that down a lot, hasn't she?
She has toned it down, but she
said she's very proud of the film.
That he treated us badly, but it resulted in a good film.
Yeah, yeah.
He has since been caught up in Me Too type allegations, which he's denied. The last one came out in October of last year and is ongoing as an investigation. And he's known for getting actresses to do non-simulated sex scenes. And they said, quote, it was horrible, and quote, they were forced to perform. And what I felt really ruined this film for me, when it could have actually been something quite beautiful. And as you said, the original author of the graphic novel, she wanted it to be with gay actresses. Perhaps it had been with a gay director, it would have been completely different. I felt the whole scene was seen through the eyes of a dirty old man.
Well,
I think, whole thing.
Yeah, I think that is the problem. I tried to remove myself from the stuff that I'd read years ago at the time, because of course that does colour your opinion of it. And I just wanted to look at it as a film, as a piece of art. And I do think it works very, very well on that level. But of course, that is the huge question mark that hangs over this film. It would be completely different had it been directed by a woman, or even better, a gay woman. But I watch tons and tons of lesbian films at the BFI Flair Festival every year. I'm lucky enough to get a press pass every year and talk about a lot of the films on the radio and in the press and stuff. And most of the lesbian films I see are made for tiny, tiny budgets, really rough around the edges, wonderfully spirited kind of films, but they don't look like this. So for me, on the one hand, it's great to see some money being put into a lesbian love story, and actually people actually getting used to the fact that women fall in love and kiss and have sex. But on the other hand, of course, it's a shame that the films that get the money are often directed by men. Even, some of the much less controversial films like Carol or something, which is, a beautiful film, but that's directed by a man as well.
The only one I was thinking of recent years was Miseducation of Cameron Post.
Oh, well, yeah. Desiree Akhavan. Yeah. Oh, my goodness. She is just awesome. She's a legend. I've interviewed her. Yeah.
When you suggested this, I was like, my first kind of thought was, oh, it's 3 hours long. I don't, because I saw it. I saw it when it came out. I think it had lots of fanfare coming out of Cannes. And I went to see it at the cinema. And I was like, I do remember the sex scenes being longer. And then thinking, oh, another one.
Yeah, I couldn't have watched this at the cinema.
So when you suggested this, I wasn't that keen, but I thought, it's been 6 years since I saw it, so it's worth reevaluation. And maybe the sex scenes have been diminished, but I don't know, for some reason I just expected that it was almost like a 3-hour sex romp was what I had in my head. But it is so much different to that.
So much more than that.
And I didn't kind of, the disparity in the ages didn't appear to me so much, because I think Léa Seydoux doesn't look so old, so the kind of age difference doesn't look so much. Adèle Exarchopoulos in this, I think Adèle, her character, gets such a rough ride from every single person that she comes across. She gets a rough ride from her friends for just going to a gay bar in the first place. She gets a rough ride from the only person that did give her a rough ride was the guy she got together with at the start, really, and her gay best friend. Her friends at school gave her a rough ride. Her parents, we don't see what happens, whether we find out if she came out to them, but they gave her a rough ride, or certainly would be closed-minded of that. Emma gave her a rough ride. Her friends gave her a rough ride for not wanting to be just happy being a teacher. And I just kind of felt really, really sorry for her all the way through this film. And she's just a young person going through these emotions, which I really can't remember. But there's some times which are super, super.
Can't remember. Did you feel that the depiction of teenage life rang true? Because for me, it didn't.
For me, it absolutely does.
Emotionally, but in the dialogue, when they're in the playground and saying, oh, have you read the latest novel by Jean-Paul Sartre?
Oh,
a lot of their conversation, it's all about, this Marivaux novel that they're reading in class, and Jean-Paul Sartre, and then, I don't know very much about painting, but I have heard of Picasso. And it felt to me like, a dialogue written by an old man in a dirty raincoat who's putting this into the mouths of teenagers, and their performances, which I think they were really, really struggled to produce. They clearly produced these under a lot of pressure. The performances are excellent, and the reality of it, and with the sound off and no dialogue, it's so powerful. It's incredibly beautiful, but the script is so bad.
I think the kids talking as adults, or high professor level adults, is a trope that happens a lot in high school films.
It does.
It's not particular to this.
Not exclusive to this. But I do think certain elements like the homophobia, you're talking about her getting a rough ride from her friends when she's been to the gay bar, that is absolutely true. Again, that is absolutely reflective of my experience, of the kind of things that would get said, the kind of, near escalation to violence that would always be present when you know that you are marked out as somebody different at school. That is feels absolutely true to me. So I suppose I'm always going to kind of feel fairly passionate about a film that does depict coming out and being gay, because that is going to be in some ways very reflective of my experience, which I don't often see on the big screen. So I think it is authentic in many ways, and I think you're right, it's very beautiful. I mean, I particularly love the scene where they're kissing in the park and the sun is kind of flaring on the lens in between their faces. I just think it's beautiful cinematography, and perhaps the dialogue in places.
The blue hair is extremely annoying also. Is it? I felt that in real life this character would not have blue hair. There's no need to give Léa Seydoux blue hair in order to match her eyes.
What's going on with her eyebrows as well? That looks strange. There's something about her eyebrows that
to me, the idea, it was a real fantasy of this older man who's thinking, there's going to be this 17-year-old girl, she's going to fall in love with this older girl, and she's going to have blue hair, and they're going to go for a picnic. I mean, it really was. I was cringing.
I feel you need to do it in a French accent to get
the blue hair.
The source novel.
For them.
One thing that's quite interesting, you said, was it you, Helen, about the writer of the graphic novel saying she felt it should have been featured 2 lesbian actors. That's something I haven't really come across that kind of point of view before.
I come across this discussion all
well,
the time.
last 2-3 years, it's become a huge discussion.
It's become a huge discussion, particularly around trans actors and trans roles. I think people are actors. I mean, obviously, we want to see gay, bi, trans actors, non-heteronormative actors getting a fair crack of the whip. Yeah. But I'd rather see them being stretched to play straight characters, actually. I think the lesbian actors I know that always get lesbian roles are a little bit hacked off with that. I mean, I present a radio show with Heather Peace, who's, TV actor, and she just always plays a lesbian ever since she was in Lip Service. And she's like, well, that's my lot now. No one thinks I can play straight. It's kind of ridiculous.
What's the name of the actor who played Juno?
Ellen Page.
Yeah, Ellen Page. Because since she came out as lesbian, now more of her roles.
She's the go-to lesbian.
But she used to have like Inception. She has a fantastic role.
Oh, brilliant role in that.
That doesn't matter about her sexuality. But I've heard. I mean, we've talked about in the film The Fundamentals of Caring, where there's Craig Robertson who plays a disabled character. In couldn't that have been a disabled guy playing that role? But the kind of gay versus gay person playing a gay role, we haven't really had that. I've never come across that before, so it's quite interesting to kind of evaluate that a little bit. I think.
I think with Blue is the warmest colour. The problem is it's the layering of it. The director is problematic. The shoot was very problematic. It seems to me that nobody involved in it has had gay experiences or can bring that sensibility. It doesn't have to be everybody, and it doesn't have to be a gay director. And of course, a director of any sexuality can bring an interesting sensibility to anything. But
what you're saying, Viv, is they needed me as a special consultant.
Scissoring consultant.
Well,
fully clothed. What they needed. Fully clothed.
They have that now with a lot of TV shows and films nowadays. They have a sexuality consultant to make sure that everyone involved in it is comfortable in the first instance, and also that things are portrayed on camera as they more realistic in those kind of intimate situations, apart from just straight out porn.
Not too realistic as well, because I just felt like they were actually having sex. I mean, they were actually having sex, and I don't want to think about the actors having to do that.
Well, the straight scene with Thomas near the start of the film is very full on.
Totally.
And, there's
we see an erect penis.
A penis shot, which is that. I mean, what certificate are you supposed to have for an erect penis shot?
I think you have to be an 18.
Okay.
Rated R in America.
Okay.
I thought it wasn't allowed.
I thought it wasn't allowed. I wasn't. I was like, oh. We tried to pause on the erect penis as well, because we missed that.
It is a very fleeting erect penis, it has to be said.
What outside of the sex scenes, which I think takes over the narrative of all the story?
I was thinking, watching it again this time round, because there's 3 or 2 separate ones. 3, isn't there? I get maybe there's the sort of reasoning behind it is to show how intense the passion is, and then obviously how that all goes away. The 3 separate moments, it's only like, we kind of get that now.
Yeah. But that's what I said when I saw it in the cinema, I was like, again.
But I don't think in the cinema I didn't really clock it as much as watching it now, sort of having known a little bit more of the background and whether it would be a completely different film if it didn't have any of that.
Have any of you seen Nymphomaniac Volumes 1 and 2 by Lars von Trier?
I purposely have not seen it.
I do not recommend it. But that's a very similar experience.
Yeah. I wondered about that.
Those scenes feel extremely intrusive, and minute for minute, as with this film, they aren't as prominent as you might think, but they dominate your mind.
Yeah.
And the whole thing becomes about that. And I think if you took all of the sex scenes out of it, of course you would lose this supposed passion. I mean, I personally didn't really buy into that, but you would lose that. But maybe then you would have had the germ of and I use the word germ advisedly, the germ of an interesting film about first love that would elevate it beyond what I thought was quite a superficial exploration of being gay.
Because we talked about other films who aren't, that it seems to have been like a rise of LGBT films, romance drama films, and myself and Helen found it difficult to think of like a straight romance film that was just a drama, not without the rom-com aspect to it. And someone brought to us Before Sunrise.
Oh, I love that trilogy.
But apart from that, you have Moonlight, you have Call Me By Your Name,
Yeah.
God's Own Country.
God's Own Country, which are really, really powerful stories. And those are kind of sex light compared to the perception of this. Carol and what was the film I said before?
Miseducation of Cameron Post.
Although that's less a romance, it's more about
the coming out kind of experience and homophobia.
So I agree with you, Viv. I don't think you needed to, and Helen, I don't think you needed to have the up close nature of the sex scenes there to portray the passion and what happens between two people as they're going through this lifestyle.
When I think of something like Sex Education, the TV series on Netflix, and how briefly extreme and explicit sex is portrayed there, very fragmentary ideas. It's more of an impression, but they don't shy away from exactly what's going on, and it's very open and graphic in the discussion of it, and it's all kinds of different sexualities, and it feels a very intimate and honest depiction of what it is like to be a teenager, and it's got that tinge of comedy. Whereas this, I felt, was showing too much and with no sense of humour. And one of the things, and Rosie, you can tell about this because you have done this when you were a young teenage lesbian. There must be lots of humorous moments and silliness and laughing and awkwardness, and there was none of that.
I guess so, but I think for
don't you have a bit of a laugh?
This is it's a very French film, though.
It's a very French film, but I think as a lesbian, you don't really have a laugh until you're in your 30s and 40s and you feel very comfortable. Obviously the world is changing, but I think it is a fairly universal experience for queer women, kind of beaten down by the double forces of homophobia and sexism. I'm sorry to get all gloomy about all this, but actually my teenage years and my 20s were awful. They were pretty relentlessly bad, and I've had a brilliant time since I started comedy in my mid-30s, and that's saved my life, really. If I'm really being honest about this, I have a really fun and lovely life now, but probably up until my late 20s I felt very excluded from the world and very isolated and very lonely. And I know that is a universal experience for tons and tons of gay women. So I think the sort of sadness, the intensity, the losing yourself in books and maybe talking in a slightly pretentious highbrow way about art is, when I first came to London, after I graduated, I did go to art exhibitions and did look at Picasso, and, I did kind of get into art because I wanted to sort of somehow see my pain reflected. So I don't think it is unrepresentative of that, the terrible burden of feeling that you're different to the rest of the people in your class at school or in your year at college and so on. I think it is quite tough. And I think things are changing, and we have much more open discussion about sexuality now, fortunately. But I think it is tough.
And I think the thing for me this time watching it was, like I said before, that Adèle just never seemed to have a smooth ride of it with anyone. And when, the first time going into a lesbian club, and everyone's like, "Oh, you're 15. You're just, what are you doing here? You've got no reason to be here." And what else? But
you want to be around people who are like you.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what you really, really want.
But being rejected by the people who you want to be around, that must have been super tough. So she's
super tough.
Ostracised by her friends from school, admittedly after that scene.
Yeah.
But then while she was in the club, she was ostracised by the people in that bar with her. And
then even when she is together with them and never really fitting in with Emma's friends.
Yeah.
It's,
you want to be a teacher. Oh.
Yeah.
But
I think sort of
don't do it.
The break, talking about the intensity of the sex scenes. For me, the other scene that stood out to me from the first time I'd seen it back in 2013 was the breakup scene.
Horrific.
It's just snotty and cryy and
is this
terrible.
In the cafe, you mean?
In the cafe.
Sure.
And I just think that scene is incredibly powerful. And probably more powerful than any of the sex scenes or anything that has gone before. But I really think that is a very visceral, I think it's one of the most kind of real and raw breakup scenes I've ever seen.
Should we head over to the scores, guys? And keep on obviously talking about this on the way through.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Welcome to the Flixwatcher spreadsheet of dreams. All of the scores are out of 5. You may have decimal places if you wish, and we will start with you, Rosie, with the recommendability, please.
Well, there are obviously some people, I wouldn't recommend it to my father or my girlfriend's mother, but I would recommend it to tons and tons of my friends who I know would enjoy this and find it really relatable. So I'd say 4.
Viv.
Oh, I'm just so I don't want to give a spoiler alert. I just want to give it 0 in all categories. That was my default. But having listened to, I knew that Rosie would have a very eloquent defence and that I would enjoy hearing what it's like to watch that film through her eyes. So in respect of that, I'm going to give it a 1.5.
That's quite a big jump from 0 to a 1.5.
Helen.
So it's so tricky, this film, because I remember when I saw it, I was just blown away by it. I just thought they were great, and how like I'd never seen a film like that before, and I probably never will. I don't think there'll be anything like that. But then trying to kind of watch it now, and it's not just the way that he kind of treated those 2 actresses, but there's also stories about how he treated everyone else on set. Yeah. And it does make, when you're watching it, it does have that kind of effect a little bit. So it is kind of hard, but it is a really striking piece of filmmaking though.
How does it compare to watching films of actors and directors who were caught up in the Me Too kind of thing now as well? So I
don't think I've revisited many of them, other than ones that maybe we've done.
So if you were to watch American Beauty and see Kevin Spacey in there, would that be like struggling? I don't think I'd... Taken outside what you think about the film?
Yeah, no, there's absolutely no way I'd rewatch that now.
I think it depends on also how much of a feature that character is. If you're a director behind the film, then it's very difficult to extract it from that. But then we watched 7. Kevin Spacey's in that, but plays a lot smaller role, so it's not really that kind of thing. But with Weinstein, we watched recently
Good Will
Hunting, and obviously he's the worst of the worst, but then he's the producer behind his film, so not necessarily involved in this kind of thing. But with Abdellatif Kechiche, 800 hours of filming to produce a 3-hour film, and I read that that scene where they first kind of see each other, that 10-second scene, was like shot over like 6 hours or something crazy just to do that.
It's very obsessive kind of sort of voyeurism that he had over them for that shooting period.
10 hours for 10 days to record those sex scenes.
Yeah, and also it is very much the kind of like the male gaze, how the male viewer would want to watch the sex scenes, and the things that he's kind of picked out are very male things.
Go on, give it a 0.
Yeah, what's your score?
The thing is, I can't give it a 0 because I think if you've never seen it and you're thinking that, oh, I've got an interest in seeing it, even if it's just because you want to see what a 13-minute sex scene is like, or because this is one of the films that I had probably seen Léa Seydoux in for the first time, and I really like her as an actress. So if I'd maybe not seen this, I might not have seen her other work, and I do think she's great. I
think you would have seen her other work because it would have been in passing.
I don't know, but I'm more now. After this, I was more likely to go, oh, I really like her. I will see that on the basis of her. So yeah, I'm going. It's really tricky. I'm going to go for a 3.7.
Oh.
What?
That was a long 3.7.
Because you really have to think that
interjected by myself.
Thing is, had we recorded this the week after I'd come out of the cinema seeing it back in 2013, I would have given it a 5.
Yeah.
But how much of that is seeing it in retrospect for the second time? How much of that is with the added layer of Kechiche's intrusions into the filming process?
I think it was more watching it at home, having seen it before, allowed me to kind of step back a little bit.
Right.
Whereas in the cinema, because it's so big, and it was more the things that up until she meets her, there's so much blue around her, and there's so many things that pop out, and they have this whole thing where they talk about like chance meetings and things like that, and she meets her and it's a chance meeting, and that kind of dominates. And then at the end there's the whole thing about she misses the chance with that other guy because she runs off. So there's all those other things, and there's the whole thing about how what the foods they eat are all related to social class, and the meal that she has with Emma's parents is all oysters, and when she goes home she has the meatballs, so it's all about class.
Yes,
and it's
that's
all
interesting too. Yeah.
about how when Emma dyes her hair natural, that's when the romance dies. So it's all those
motifs,
things that I really liked in the first time.
Love all that. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think it was more the kind of the hours of footage, and it is the bit where she's eating the spaghetti. I think I really like, but also having the camera like on you for every minute is a bit like celebrity TV. But I do still think it does still have those things with the blue and things that I did like.
I'm going to go for 3.5 here.
These are ridiculously high scores.
I liked it a lot better this time than I thought I was going to, and I hadn't seen it. Well, I was going to time with the repeat viewing score, but I left the cinema the first time thinking, it's fine. I can kind of see why it won the Palme d'Or. I'm glad that both Adèle and Leia got recognised as well as part of the Palme d'Or as part of that. So that's a nice step. But one thing I really liked this time is I really liked the big kind of face shots and how it was shot this time. This is something I didn't take away. Maybe I didn't remember from the previous time. And I did like the interactions between them. I thought whilst some of the speech patterns and what they're talking about were ridiculous, you see that so much.
That is French people for you, really.
It's French, it's Americans. Woody Allen does that a lot with his actors.
That's
and
what you
characters,
do when you're trying to impress someone for the first time.
Dawson's Creek was like that. No one talks like they did in Dawson's Creek. 3.5. Repeat viewing score. Rosie.
Well, I actually enjoyed it even more the second time of watching it, and I possibly would watch it again. So just to kind of keep it, try and save this film from such a terrible beating it's going to get from Viv, I'm going to go 5 because I loved it on repeat viewing.
Defensive really scoring. Did. How do you think? How frequently do you think you're going to rewatch it?
Well, I actually hardly ever rewatch anything.
Sure.
Usually the only reason I rewatch something is if I didn't understand it, which was the reason I rewatched Inception. But there are very, very, very few films apart from that and E.T. that I think, which is a timeless classic, probably one of the best films ever.
Is it?
Yes, it is.
Is it though?
It is.
I rarely watch things again, so for me to love something even more second time round is quite something actually, and to really connect with it even more. So yeah.
Viv.
Well, I would pay money, any amount of money you want, never to have to watch that ever again. I just can't see any reason to ever watch that again. If I knew nothing about the director and I knew that they'd have received wonderful treatment throughout the shoot and he'd behaved like a father to them, as a nice father, then I still wouldn't want to watch it again. However, for the boyfriend who cries, I'll give it a 0.5.
For the boyfriend that cries. Helen.
So this is when I'm going to say it is 3 hours long. It is a long film to rewatch. And I don't know, did I get that much more watching it from the second time round? I think the only thing that I got from it the second time round was a slight uncomfortable feeling, which, had I not rewatched it, I would have been like, oh yeah, Blues One's coming, it's great, you should all watch it. I'm going to give it a 1. I don't think I'm going to go back to it again.
Yeah, I can't see myself going back to it again unless someone invites me on a podcast. I'm going to watch Blues and Warmest Colour. I think I've got enough from it on the second time. I think it's worth a repeat viewing. Maybe I'll pump it up to 1.5 because I think it's worth watching again a few years later. But I can't see myself watching it much more in the future. Small screen score, Rosie.
I'll go 4.5. Still worked really well for me.
Viv?
This is a tricky one for me because I was seeing it for the first time on the small screen. So I think I'll have to mark it down, surprisingly, because from what Helen was saying, I think it does play a lot better. Like the very few qualities that this film has are suited for big cinema viewing. Which
Are you feeling okay here, Rosie?
Sorry, Rosie. I think
fine with
Rosie
it.
and I know each other.
We know each other. It's absolutely fine.
I think, the qualities that it has, that's why it won the Palme d'Or, because people win the Palme d'Or because everybody in the screening room rises to their feet in a standing ovation because they admire the filmmaking so much, and it's very much a filmmakers award, and that is very relevant in terms of large screen and small screen. So it's a 1.
Helen?
So it is a very different experience sitting at home. I felt more uncomfortable watching it at home than I did in the cinema because you do kind of feel a little bit like a bit more of a perv, maybe, because you're watching in your home and you're kind of like on your own, and whereas in the cinema you kind of have to sit there and you can choose not to look away or you can choose to applaud or things. So it is quite a different experience, and it does. The cinematic things I think have less of an impact watching it on a smaller screen, and I don't know. It was just I felt a bit weird watching it on a TV this side. So I'm not sure. I'm going to go down the middle, 2.5.
It's interesting because in a small screen I took away more from it in terms of how it was shot this time round. I think maybe I was a bit embarrassed in the first time. I was like, what am I doing here? And still, how much is left? But I enjoyed it more the second time round, so I think it does work all right on a small screen. Probably is better in a big screen though. I'm going to go for a 4 because I think if I was to watch it, if I was the second rewatch was to be on a bigger screen, I think it would have been a nicer experience generally. Okay, engagement score, Rosie.
And this is sort of how drawn in you are, how engaged.
Exactly,
you're not
yeah.
going to look at your phone, and obviously you're not going to look at your phone when there's a film with subtitles. And you
That's
can't,
true, actually.
You can't eat spaghetti. So I would say 5.
When you're in it, you're in it.
When you're in it,
Viv?
yeah, you've got to immerse yourself in it.
Well, I'm going to be generous here, and I do want to applaud the 2 lead actresses,
Sure.
because they are the thing that makes this engaging, and I think that because of it winning the Palme d'Or and this incredibly difficult shoot that they went through, this was a huge moment for both of their careers, and they need to receive a bit of a kudos for that. So 2.5. That's a massive.
It is saying it was going to be a 0.
Yeah.
It's really
Helen.
built up. So if you weren't aware, yes, it is subtitled. So it is very hard to half-heartedly watch this film and still know what's going on. So even though I'd seen it before, if you're not listening properly to what they're saying, then you're just not going to get the film and you're not going to get anything about them. So a 5.
I think the subtitles, as much as I love them, it means that you have to be like switched on to watch it. And that for me meant I was like, oh, should I watch this tonight? Should I watch it tomorrow night? And in fact, I ended up watching that in 3 stints because I was sometimes a bit tired and I just kind of ducked out of it. So I'm going to go 2.5 here.
I speak French and it's no better in French. Let you know that. There is a really weird tick that Adèle has. I don't know. I think a lot of the dialogue was improvised. And she says, whenever she has to evaluate anything, she always says, c'est trop bien. C'est trop bien. She says it about food. She says it about relationships. She says it about the way that somebody looks. C'est trop bien. It's too good. And that that was one of the most interesting things about the entire film for me. Because it's a very interesting choice of words.
Is that something
And
do
it
you think
was
might be
always-
particular to Lille?
It was translated in the subtitles as "it's great,"
Yeah.
and it doesn't really mean that.
No.
And
It's a very sort of insecure thing to say, like it's almost too good.
I do like watching subtitle films and seeing the difference in what is written versus what is
Yes.
actually said. And like, even when you don't understand the language, you're like, that's not what you said. Like in La Haine, there's one character called Asterix, but they called him Snoopy in the subtitles. Like, what the hell are you playing at? Just call him Asterix. Anyway, so that gives us the overall score of 2.98125, which I think is quite good considering Viv's outlook on it in the first place. But we always reach out to the guys on Twitter to get your opinion on it before we go into the record. We had a decent response from this. Rosie, do you want to take us with the first one? Dominic Holder's gone over 2 parts, I think.
Says, intriguing film, beautifully shot and beautifully played. A great character study of young love. Yes, it is a little voyeuristic at times, but a tremendously unflinching, realistic portrayal.
That is from the director's brother.
I'd give it 4. Brilliant films always lose 1 star from me if, despite their brilliance, I don't really have any burning desire to watch again. See also The Revenant as a completely different example.
Viv, can you take the next one, please?
So the Contrarians say 4.5 out of 5 stars. Unflinching look at young love and young sex. Fantastic performances, heartbreaking story. Very interesting reuse of the word unflinching. And that idea of flinch, like it does make you want to flinch. I think that's really interesting.
Helen, do you want to take the last one?
So this is from Top Film Tip. Schoolgirl experiences emotionally astute and physically euphoric first love in oyster-eating raw romance. #blue is the warmest colour. Character-led, affecting bittersweet drama. And then we've got 4 scissors out of 5 blue dresses.
Loving that.
That's Ben, a former guest, and loves his language in tweets.
That was a very slightly easier one to read.
Yeah,
Sometimes they can be a
they
bit
can be
more
tongue twisters.
tongue-twistery.
Viv and Rosie, can you sign off by telling everyone where we can find you online? Just remind everyone where we can find your tickets and your books and your podcasts and everything like
I'm
that.
On Twitter at Rosie Wilby. I've got a book out called Is Monogamy Dead, which looks at relationships and love. And I did a whole survey asking what counts as cheating and that kind of thing, and what secrets couples keep from each other. 12 people confessed to secretly giving themselves the best portion of food, which was interesting. So find out all the results to my survey in the book. And the Breakup Monologues podcast is on all good podcast platforms, Spotify, iTunes, etc. There are 2 seasons out in full, and we've just started season 3. And kingsplace.co.uk is the place to go for tickets for the shows on 11th of October and 8th of November.
And if you've missed those, there will be more.
And there's also at Breakup Monologues on Instagram. And yes, we will have more shows in 2020 as well. We usually have an annual sort of Valentine's Eve show on the 13th of February at Poplar Union in East London.
Viv?
And I am on Twitter and Instagram at Viv Groskop.
I'm just going to follow you now. Hold on. You're there on the screen. Boop.
VIVGROSKOP. Rather strange name, meaning lively fat head for Yiddish fans out there. And my book is called How to Own the Room, Women and the Art of Brilliant Speaking. And on Instagram every day for 2019 and possibly for 2020, if I'm feeling bold enough, I showcase a room-owning woman, somebody who is really spectacular in the way that they communicate. And I do that every single day and analyse how they do that. And they're fully clothed and not scissoring. So if you want a break from something that makes your eyeballs tingle, come check out my Instagram.
Has this been imprinted on your mind now for the past since you watched it?
I'm quite traumatised.
Right.
Traumatised, yeah. Traumatisée.
C'est trop bien. Okay.
Désolé,
thank you.
Viv.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Bye.
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 Enjoyed this episode of Flixwatcher podcast? Why not leave us a 5-star review on iTunes? You can also follow us at FlixWatcherPod on Twitter, and we're at FlixWatcher on Instagram. Thanks as always to the mighty people for their mighty, mighty tunes, and Ben from Rockwood Audio for his awesome editing skills. If you're looking to get your podcast edited as sweet as this, get in touch with Ben, and that's Rockwood, ROKK Wood Audio. Tell them Flixwatcher sent you.
just heard a Stripped Media production.